Welcome to Disambiguation. I'm your host, Michael Fawcett. Each week, we interview experts in artificial intelligence, generative AI, and business automation to help business leaders understand how to use these tools for the biggest business impact. Our show today is Building Visibility, How Personal Brand Drives Business Growth. I'm joined by Jimi Gibson, VP of Brand Communication at Thrive Internet Marketing Agency. Jimi, welcome.
Glad to be here, Michael. Looking forward to our conversation. By the way, I love the title of the podcast, so hopefully we can make things less disambiguous.
I like it. I like it. Thank you. Yeah, no, that was a fortuitous choice, I think. So anyway, why don't we start by just telling us a little bit about yourself, your role at Thrive Internet Marketing Agency. And I know you have a pretty unique path to where you are now, so we can probably chat about that a little bit too.
Yeah, sure. Thrive Agency is a 20-year-old digital marketing agency, which is sort of a unicorn in the digital marketing space. But I think it positions us well to have a conversation about where all this AI stuff is going. We've seen just about every algorithm update that Google has thrown our way and our clients' way. I actually started with the agency about 5.5 years ago and started to blow up their strategy department. Not that they hadn't done strategy before, but we really wanted to lean into that. I'm a firm believer if you don't have a good strategy, you're going to end up somewhere very expensive and probably somewhere you don't want to be.
Absolutely.
And so, yeah, my career actually started, I was a graphic designer and I moved my way up to creative director and then I ran an agency. And so at Thrive, we work with about 1,000 active clients. We have about 160 team members. And so we're doing a lot of stuff and seeing a lot of things on what's working and what's not working. But you did tease the audience with a little bit of interesting origin story. I actually started out as a professional magician. So I, probably like most boys, for whatever reason, boys seem to be more attracted to magic kits, but I got one when I was very young, about 4 years old. My parents, I think, signed me up for some mail order subscription to Merlin's mail order magic club. And I was like, wow, that kind of stuck. I'm still talking about it. And yeah, I was doing shows through middle school. My friends' parents were paying me to entertain my friends. I was getting 25 bucks and I thought I was a millionaire. And then in high school, I met a guy who was the account manager for a Fortune 100 company that was looking for a promotional entertainer. And I stayed with that role for about 16 years and hung out, at the ad agency on various occasions for meetings and thought, you know what, if there was any career that was similar to magic, it would be in marketing. And so, yeah, I transitioned into marketing. I still do magic shows. And I think what that taught me, and I know we'll get into a little bit of that, is how do you capture attention? How do you hold that attention? And then where do you move that person to on a stage? It's, the climax of the magic trick. It either works or it doesn't work. In a sales conversation or a marketing conversation or a leadership conversation, it's kind of, there's some different paths, but they all have some similarities associated with it. So yeah, there's sort of my dual performance and marketing background.
Interesting. Well, I will tell you, I do have some friends in tech that would tell you that they believe marketing is magic. So it kind of makes sense to me,
Yeah,
actually.
absolutely.
I'm curious though, because obviously performer mindset. I mean, how does that shape the way you think about brand visibility and audience engagement?
Yeah, I would say there are things that happen backstage and there are things that happen on stage. And so any type of, a website, there's things that are happening in the back end of the website that people don't see. There's the overt things on the homepage that you want people to read or watch or engage with. And so there's lots of similarities there. I would say there's really three things that I see, and one of them is really about how do you connect with your audience to begin with. And so I can't just walk out on stage and immediately assume that the audience is with me. I have to have some rapport. I have to have them believe that I'm credible. I have to have them feel that they want to invest their time in watching what I'm doing and not looking at their phones or talking to the person sitting beside them. And so the first part of that is that connection point. And, we've heard terms like rapport and, all of these uh, behaviors that a salesperson might go through. Hey, look at something in their office and pick out some common ground. I would say that's not dissimilar to how we should be looking at any type of communication. The next part is activating that curiosity, and that really is where you need to hold that attention. Attention is a finite resource. There's a period of time where you can sustain that attention, or it goes away and the people have checked out in whatever that might be. It could be in the written word, it could be in a video that you post, it could be in an in person meeting, whatever the case may be. And we'll get into some of the science associated with that. And then sooner or later, there has to be a point to what you're saying. So you have to establish, why should I listen to you? You have to activate that curiosity, and then you have to bring it to a conclusion. And as I said earlier on stage, it's the culmination of the magic trick. The person floats, the card is selected, and then you guess the correct card. Somebody saw it in half and you put them back together, which, by the way, I've done that trick about 750 times. And thankfully, the person
Successfully,
is
I
always
hope.
successful, yes. Um, and then, in business, that's the call to action, the conversion. That could be filling out a form, that could be add to cart or complete the purchase. That could be, yes, come out and do a quote and I'll sign the contract. And so I would say there are a lot of similarities to what that looks like from uh, a magic structured, choreographed trick, because actually what you're doing is you're trying to entertain somebody in a way that people know how the world works. There's physics, and we're trying to defy that and have you go, "What? How is that possible?" In a business situation, I think there are some ways that you can provide that wow to your customer, and I think a lot of those have become lost over the years because we're very impatient. We have very knowledgeable consumers these days, whether it be B2C or B2B, and everybody just wants to rush to that close, right? And that's kind of an icky place that people on the receiving end don't want to be rushed into.
No. Yeah, no, that's interesting. I mean, I've definitely seen that a lot in trying to, work with salespeople, and I
Mm,
was often the subject matter expert they brought in to try to build credibility, and
yeah.
and halfway through they're trying to close, and you're like, look, I'm not done with my story yet. Just stop for a
Mhm.
minute. I want to build a little interest here.
Oh yeah.
Oh, you when we were talking before, you mentioned, this framework that you created around connectivity, curiosity, conversion, you call the magic script.
Yep.
For the business leaders in the audience, they who wanna build their own visibility, and certainly we talk a lot about personal brand and that, influence. How does that framework translate from stage magic to thought leadership?
Yeah. Um, well, if you're up for it, maybe we'll try a little something that I think would
Yeah.
demonstrate the approach, and then we can break that down. Um, Remind me where you are sitting. What part of the country?
Well, for the last year or so, I've been at my mom's in Georgia, so North Georgia.
Oh, nice. Well, I'm right up the street in Charleston, South Carolina, and so
Very nice,
I
very
used to
nice.
live in Savannah, Georgia.
Mhm.
What part of Georgia?
It's, Northwest Dalton, and actually both of my daughters went to SCAD, so we know Savannah very well.
Oh,
So,
nice, nice. And
mm,
so sounds like you might be in a neighborhood and you're able to take some walks in the beautiful countryside of
mhm.
Georgia.
Yep,
Yep.
yep.
I want you to let's take a walk. Maybe the listeners and the viewers can take a walk with us and they can go on their own journey and we'll see where things end up. Um, are you in a neighborhood? Is it pretty rural? How close is the next door neighbor?
It's a neighborhood, and she lives in a condominium townhouse sort of development, so the
Okay.
neighbors are attached.
Nice, nice. Well, let's take a walk down the street through that neighborhood. And there's probably a neighborhood that you're used to walking down, or excuse me, a street that you're used to walking down. And there might be a street or two that you're like, I don't usually go down that street, but let's venture down that one today. Fair enough?
Mhm. Fair
Okay.
enough.
So again, listeners, viewers, you can take this journey with us and we'll see where we end up. So Michael, I want you to stop at a house along that street. It could be in the middle of the block, the beginning. I'm not familiar with that area, but you probably got one in mind that, you've kind of noticed before, but you really haven't stopped and studied the house. And as you pass that house and you stop, you look and that front door is open and you're like, that's kind of weird. The front door is open. The time that we're recording this, it might be a little bit cooler. And I know it gets pretty hot in Georgia and humid, which also wouldn't be a good time to leave the door open because
Mhm.
there's also bugs and all kind of critters that could run in. But the door is open and you look sort of around the corner where the light switch might be as you enter the home, and there's like this stick or club leaned up against the wall. And your immediate reaction might be, oh my gosh, maybe this house has been broken into. Should I take a look? So that's one scenario. This is kind of a choose your adventure type of thing, Michael. The next scenario is you're standing there and you're looking, and something just feels nice. That door is open, but you get a feeling that there might be a party or a get together going on. And the front door is open because everybody who's showing up is a friend or a relative or a loved one. And they're just going to walk in the front door and join that party that's probably going on in the kitchen because that's where usually people congregate
Yeah.
when, the start of an event. So that's scenario two. The third scenario is kind of strange because as you look at the house, your eye's drawn to the yard, and there's these little holes that are dug in the yard, all around the yard. And you're thinking, that's weird. This is really not the time you should be planting anything. You see a shovel or a spade leaned up against the tree, and you think, wow, this is probably a pretty high intense person who's doing some gardening and they've dug all these holes. Maybe they're in the backyard, or are they trying to bury something? I have no idea what's going on. So that's scenario number three. Scenario number four is you've sort of decided to take this walk at that perfect golden hour, and the light is just hitting the floor in the entranceway of that home with the door still open. And I guess they've just polished the floor, they've mopped the floor, something, it's shining. And the way that sun sparkles off of it, it's just glowing and glittering, kind of shining like diamonds. And so I've just given you 4 scenarios.
Mhm.
The first one, we've got that stick or that club leaned up against the door. The next one, something nice is going on. Family or friends are coming over. The next one, all those holes dug all over the yard. And the next one, you have that really shiny floor. Which one of those feels interesting to you enough to approach that house and figure out what's going on?
Well, I mean, of course, the photographer in me likes the golden hour story, but I have to
Oh,
say, I'm sort of thinking I might be a party crasher today. I don't know.
oh, so scenario 2, you wanna
Yeah,
see what's going on in there.
I
Okay.
do.
Well, we did have a chat before we talked about what we were going to chat about. We didn't prearrange any of this, but I did get a sense that you're respectful of other people's property, and there's 13 steps that go up to that
Mhm.
landing on the porch, and you start to walk up those steps before you call out and say, "Hey, is there anybody there? This is Michael. What step do you get to?" So it can be step number 1, step number
Mm.
13. What do you think?
I'm probably around 12.
Oh, around 12. Okay. Well, I don't know if you noticed this or not, but there is a deck of cards right here behind me that's been on this table the whole time. And the interesting thing is, and I'll keep these in view for those of you who are watching, those of you who are listening will just follow along. It's a deck of cards inside of a sealed box. We took a little trip. I gave you 4 scenarios. Interesting
Mhm.
that the first one was a club or a stick leaned up against the wall. The
Mhm.
next one was loved ones or a heart inside the house. The
Mhm.
next one was a spade or a shovel leaned up against the tree.
Mhm.
And the last one, which you were attracted to as the photographer, shining like diamonds. So we have the 4 suits, right?
Mhm.
And so you've chosen a heart. And then I said there are 13 steps, 1 through 13. And if you take ace low as 1 all the way up to
Mhm.
13, which is the king,
Yeah.
you chose 12, which is a queen. So in effect, you've chosen the queen of hearts. And again, we didn't prearrange anything. I'm just going to pull these cards out of the box and sort of go through him right here on camera. Don't know what's going to happen here. Oh, wait a minute. Michael, there is one that is turned around facing the opposite direction. And this was, a destination that you chose. The listeners and the viewers may have chosen a different destination, but you landed on the Queen of Hearts.
Very nice. Very nice.
So possibly the first magic trick that's been on your podcast,
It
but
it is most assuredly the first magic trick on the podcast.
so I couldn't resist using that framework. You asked me about the magic script. There's a lot
Yep,
going on
yep.
here, and let's break down exactly what's happening. And I think, as the audience is sort of rewinding in their head what happened, the first thing that I did was what? When I said,
Um,
let's try something.
well, you set the stage, right? So,
Right, I started asking
I'm
you
going
where
for a
you
walk.
lived. We
Yeah.
had a common,
Mhm,
knowledge of, Savannah, so SCAD is the arts, school in Savannah, and then I'm
mhm.
familiar with Georgia, and so making that connection, right?
Yep.
And so that connection is actually a neurotransmitter release into your bloodstream of oxytocin, and
Mm,
that's sort of the trust, chemistry in your
mm,
head going, "Oh, that's kinda cool. Well, I like how this conversation is going. Let's keep it going." And so anytime you're engaged in a marketing message, a leadership message to your team, a sales conversation, that's that connection part. We talked about that earlier, right?
yep.
The magician walks out on stage. They might say, "Hey, glad to be here in this town," may have a couple of comments, and so you're building that trust. And so once that trust is built, then you have permission to move to the next phase. Now, the next phase was a little strange. We're going on this walk together, and I'm telling you to imagine these scenarios. Again, with your artistic background, you probably got a clear picture in your head of
Mhm.
these various scenes that were happening. Tell me, like, what were you experiencing as we were walking through these scenarios? Was it engaging? Were you entertained? Was it confusing? Tell me a little bit about that.
No, it actually was very clear picture. I immediately thought, "Oh, yeah, there's this street for this really nice neighborhood. I'd probably turn left down that, and it's a circle, so I walk around, and, there's a particularly nice looking colonial style house, and I sort of pictured that, and
Mm,
and I usually take my dog with me for a walk, so I was just thinking about how she would like the yard and, all that sort of uh, engagement that we'd have both of us would have with that house, nice yard,
nice, nice. I can see that myself. Were you wondering where this was going?
I was wondering where it was going, yes.
Well, that is the activation of curiosity, and that's a release of
Mhm,
dopamine. We've probably all heard dopamine and social media
mhm,
addiction. It's actually not the addiction to social media, it's the expectation of closure or an expectation of a reward.
mm,
And so when you post something on social media, you're hoping somebody likes it, shares it, engages with it. And so that's what's going on here. But again, I have to know my audience. I have to read the room. We have people listening and watching this, but it's just you and me in the room. And I can't drag this out for too long, right? Because then
right,
you're going to get bored and you're going to go, we've got some other things to talk about, Jimmy. Let's get on with it, right? And so it has to be the appropriate amount. And then it also has to relate to how we connected at the beginning. And so I ask you about the neighborhood, and now we're walking through the neighborhood. And so there is this sustained period where you're curious as to what's going on, but you're expecting that we're going in a direction, right?
yep.
And so that brings us to the final stage. And you'll notice I did drag this out a little bit. I started to rewind. And at what point did you start to connect the dots with the suits? And we've got this deck of cards. I noticed you laughed a little bit when I turned around. Was there some moment where it clicked for you that went, oh, okay, I'm just been brought into a card trick?
Yeah, I started to associate, when I particularly when I thought about the golden hour, the view, that, you
Mm.
know, diamond glistening kind of thing, so that sort of started to draw me into the idea that this was, moving down the path of a magic trick.
Cool. Um, and so now I have to deliver. And, the folks who were watching were probably going, oh my gosh, is that going to be the Queen of Hearts? And so I held that a little bit. And so that is building up the tension. Either it's,
Mhm.
this is going to be a good episode, or this is going to get, on the editing room floor if it doesn't go the way it needs to go. And so, there are some stakes there. But then when I turn it around, that's the release of serotonin, and that's the feel good. Everything is right with the world. This is kind of cool. And so each one of those stages are really
Mhm.
how we want to absorb information.
Mhm.
Um, I just did a post this morning on LinkedIn about the data dump disease that a lot of people have when they do a presentation. There is scientific research that says
Mhm.
people are engaged with stories for all the reasons that we just went over.
Yep.
And so somebody asked me a couple of years ago, how do you translate magic into a communication message? And so as I started to reverse engineer what happens with a magic trick, which is what you've just seen, how can that be applied in a business situation? And there's more to it than just that little demonstration, but I think that gives us at least a representation and an experience that's different than if I just described it, right? And so that's another thing. It's kind of the when you tell somebody a story and you go, "Oh, well, you had to be there." Well, thankfully, we were able to demonstrate that and everybody was here. And
Yeah.
so when you're thinking about writing a post or doing a social media post or creating a campaign or speaking to your team about the next quarter goals, um, you can follow this framework
Mhm.
and it will put you in a much better position to have that communication go successfully.
Yeah. No, that resonates with me. I definitely see the power in telling the story. And one of the things a few years ago, I was involved in a training a whole research department that I ran
Mm.
at my previous company, and one of the things we spent a lot of time on was storytelling with data, because that's actually one of the issues I think in tech is we love our data,
Oh, yeah.
and a lot of times we just want to toss out chart after chart after chart. But if you can't actually weave any story around it, why should I engage with it as an audience, right? Why, what
Yeah.
draws me in? What makes me want to resolve that anticipation that you build as you tell that story?
Yeah,
Mm,
and data tells a story, right?
mm,
There's, many ways to interpret that data. How you see that data, may be different than how somebody else sees that
mhm.
data, and you wanna make sure that everybody's hearing the same story, otherwise there can be some misinterpretations of that data, so
Yeah.
that's, yeah, absolutely the case. The other thing that I wanted to make sure people understood is I call it the magic script because it is a script. There is a sequence to it. It's
Mm.
not the magic improv, right? It's not,
Right. Right.
we're just going to figure this out on the fly. There is work that's done behind the scenes and backstage, and then it's brought onto the stage, and that gives you a much better chance of success. So, yeah,
Mm. Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense to me, and I think that's a powerful way to tie things together in a way that does build up and make your audience engage more. So that's yeah, that makes sense.
yeah,
When we were prepping this, we were talking a little bit about how you got to where you are right now, and I thought this story was interesting, and I'd love to kind of understand this more about how Thrive's owner came to you a year and a half or so ago,
yeah,
and wanted you to become the face of the company. And I know you said you were all in on it, but for the audience, I think if what walk us through the first 90 days. What does that look like? And how did what did you prioritize when you were building out that visibility? Because you were really starting mostly from scratch.
yeah. Uh, well, it's been fun since that year and a half ago, but I was a little bit like, as they say, the deer in the headlights when it happened for a couple of reasons.
Mm,
Um, so I would say 18, 24 months ago is really when all this AI tidal wave started to happen and people were wondering, is SEO dead? What's going to happen with all of this time that we've spent up to this
mm,
point? Um, Lots of internal meetings about what do we do about our clients' work? What do we do about our own visibility and reputation?
mm,
And one of the things that we saw from other industries and other competitors, frankly, was there was uh, an intentional process of being visible and having things out there that were educational, thought leadership, which I'm not a big fan of that word, but um, and we had done that a little bit, but really had not leaned in the way that we should have. And so the owner came and said, "Yeah, this whole AI thing is actually changing the way in which companies are visible." And we'll get into some of the technical and specific things related to that. Um, we need somebody to be the face of the company because no longer can a company be a faceless brand.
Yeah.
Um, now, Matt Bowman, he's great, very smart, but he did not want to be out there doing what I'm doing. And he said, "We'd like for you to do this." And of course, with my performance background, I had already been writing some articles for Forbes. I had already been doing some content things just because I felt, you know, I wanted to be able to explain things in a way that people could understand. And so it was a natural progression of, officially being that person. Um, I would say that news came in about October, a year and a half ago. And then I sort of planned, again, strategy brain, how I was going to go about it, and really was intentional about what activities I was going to do. So I would say probably the first 30 days was research. Um,
Mm,
and I was looking at other companies. I was looking at all the research related to AI. I was looking at how SEO was transitioning from the traditional approach of keyword to the way some of these large language models, or LLMs as they're called, were picking up information. I was researching some other people that I had been following to see what they were doing.
mm,
And I had a loose but uh, factual based plan to go off of that started that year of 2025. And I would say for the next 30 days, we did hire a company that helped me get on a few, maybe 12 podcasts to start with. Um, I started pitching to write articles for Entrepreneur. We formalized the process for me to write about a 3,000 word blog on the company website, which had my bio and information associated with it. I followed up each one of those blogs with about a 15-minute video that we posted on YouTube. I sliced and diced that video into shorts that also went on YouTube, but then they were also distributed through our other social channels with the company. And I just got in that rocket ship and we went off, and I started doing all of those things the next 30 days.
mm,
And I would say I continued down that path and then also listened to what was working, what was not working, what podcast hosts were interested in hearing about, what they just sort of went, okay, on to the next question. And they weren't really engaged with. We did look at how this content was being picked up through some of these large language models. And there was a volume of things that I just continued to do. Sometimes you don't wanna change too quickly. You wanna let it stay in the oven and bake a while, and
mm,
so I started looking back in that September, October timeframe as we were moving into Q4, and I said, "Okay, here's the learnings," and I know you asked for the first 90 days, but I think the first 90 days sets up, the year. And
mhm,
then I said, "Well, I've only got 3 months left. What would I change about what I did so that I could end the year on a high?" And, um, that's sort of the big
mm,
overview of the plan. I'm happy to go into any specifics related to why I chose what I chose and
mm,
what ended up working in the end, and how I'm trying to level that up for this year. But I
sure.
think the big takeaway is I didn't choose one thing. I chose a variety of things.
Mm,
It was written, it was audio, it was video. There were credibility signals along the way with
mm,
some of the choices that I made. And the other one is I had to get over the fact that I did have a history as a performer, but when I first started, I was virtually invisible to these large
Right.
language models, and so there was a baseline of where I was, and then I was tracking to see how
Mm,
I was being picked up, and then what was the difference between, October 2024 and October 2025,
mm,
was quite significant.
mm. I mean, obviously, my world of tech industry analysts, and I've worked with analysts and managed large groups of analysts for years, and one of the things I've talked with them a lot about is personal brand. And I
Yeah.
think also from my own starting my own company and doing the research around what that looks like there,
Mm.
I've seen that a business owner or executive's personal visibility, it really directly translates to company growth, companies, trust with their audience, their customers. Talk a bit about how that ties in with what you've seen at Thrive, and how that supports, that connectivity or with the audience.
Yeah. So I actually have a research report coming out at the end of Q1 that will give the data points associated with this. Um, so it's not all anecdotal. Search Engine Journal, which is a very
Mm,
respected journal within the SEO world, published a report at the end of 2025 that said if an executive, and it doesn't have to be the CEO, the owner, it could be a subject matter within the organization,
mm,
publishes content on LinkedIn 10 times a year. That's it, 10 times a year. They have seen their referrals increase by 30% and have larger deal sizes.
mm,
And so, why is that? Well, one of the things that these large language models like is they like people. They don't like companies per se. A company is a disconnected entity
mm,
with without any personal experience or expertise. The experience and expertise lies within the person. And so we've seen that when somebody within the organization is proactively involved in stating their opinion and not hitting the easy button of chat gpt, but actually demonstrates and attaches their name and their bio to that content, these large language models love it. And they're able to understand that this piece of content was written by an expert. Um, and so the transfer of that visibility to the company is much stronger than vice versa. And so if you have a couple of people within the organization who are intentional about developing their personal brand, and again, that that word carries a lot of weight of like, "Oh, well, that's very self-centered. That's not my personality. I don't wanna be a content creator. This is gonna take up all my time." The bar is extremely low. I just gotta
mm.
tell you. I just told you posting on LinkedIn 10 times a year. Like,
Yeah,
you don't even have to write it. You can have somebody in your organization, and again, don't have them just write, the easy button of ChatGPT. If you make that effort, you're going to stand head and shoulders about above the folks who are
mm,
relying on generic content that does not demonstrate their expertise. And so I would
mm,
say we've seen that with our clients, with research that we've done, and then the fact that I'm stepping out and I'm doing it. And I can't say that it's the right thing to do if I don't have the experience doing it myself
mhm.
and showing you exactly the value that it creates.
Yeah. I mean, again, that resonates very much with what I've seen, over the last 20 years or so, and
Yeah.
certainly, the whole discussion around search engine optimization, and how do you get recognized, has shifted, right? I mean,
Oh, yeah.
I wanted to be visible on Google search. Now I really want to be visible in Claude or Perplexity or
Right.
whatever. So maybe we step in and let's talk a little bit about answer engine optimization or AEO, and generative engine optimization or GEO. And can you tell us a little bit, for the audience, business leaders, they tend to think in SEO kind of in a traditional way, but
Right.
we have to shift, right? So what do they need to know about that? And then what's this shift about? How do they understand it, that AI driven search really has changed the way companies get found?
Yeah. So traditional SEO was based on keywords, and the goal was to rank in the 10 blue links on page one of Google, right? Um, what we're seeing now, and of course, Google has released the AI mode, which is sort of
Yeah.
a hybrid version of a large language model, but it relies on data associated with everything that Google has in its database. But when you look at Claude, Perplexity, ChatGPT, Gemini, Grok, these are not Google. These are other platforms, and 37% of searches now originate in one of those platforms.
Yep.
Okay. 61% of searches, even in Google, don't end up with a click to a website. They call that zero click
Yep.
because the information is being displayed on the results that come back as recommendations. Again, not that ranking. It's a different display of that information.
Yeah.
Um, we have seen our clients' traffic drop off significantly.
Mhm.
Now, yes, that can cause business owners to freak out. What we've also seen is that AI driven traffic to your website converts at 3.5 to 4 times the rate of traditional traffic to your website. So less traffic, higher rate of conversion.
Yep.
Depending on what your client base is using to do the search, they may or may not get a direct link to the website.
Yeah.
So ChatGPT, Claude, they usually don't have a link. And so people are taking that information. Then they're doing a Google search that then goes to your website. So attribution is all over the place because it may be coming from AI. It may actually be coming from somebody seeing it at AI and then clicking. Perplexity does provide links.
Yeah.
But what does all this mean? So generative engine optimization, or GEO, is basically optimizing for these large language models. Answer engine optimization is basically optimizing for voice search, which could be a voice search on your phone. It could be a device that you have at home, an Alexa, um, Amazon type of device, a Google Home device. Um, Now, all of these searches are, as the name implies, answer engine optimization.
Mm.
They are people, whether it be a company or an individual, looking for an answer to their question.
Yeah.
And so a typical Google search may be 4 or 5 words. One of these voice searches or a uh, chat GPT search, the average number of words is about 32 words. And so it's very conversational. Now, what are these large language models looking for? Um, and you can interrupt at any point if I'm kind of dragging this on too long,
No, no,
but
no.
um, there was an acronym by Google in around 2016 called EAT. They actually expanded it in the early 2020s to EEAT, which is experience, expertise, authority, and trustworthiness. And so these large language models have adopted that approach in how they decide who is part of the list that is presented. And again, it's not a ranking model. There is a knowledge base where these large language models learn about folks out there.
Mm.
Um, they're not, in effect, searching the web like Google is, but they are trying to figure out who is the most experienced, authoritative, trustworthy source to answer the question.
Mhm.
Um, I would say if you don't have client reviews, uh, get on it quickly because reviews are a huge indicator of trustworthiness.
Mhm.
Um, we've read about the fact that these large language models are using Reddit, which are basically user experience platforms for people to talk about various things. They're also looking at transcripts from YouTube. If you don't have a YouTube channel, it's probably a good time for you to start one, and it doesn't have to be, this Hollywood channel, but it is a primary place where these large language models go to learn.
Yeah.
It also like I said, is looking at reviews. Traditional SEO used to be about backlinks. Backlinks are still very important, but it leans more towards quality over quantity. And so, um, as you heard me talk about before, I've been a contributing uh, columnist on Forbes and Entrepreneur. That has a different authority based signal than the local newsletter of a realtor. Nothing against a local newsletter of a realtor, but it is what it is. And so you sort of have to be a student of where do you put your effort? What's the best choice in the way you approach this? And then the other thing it also is picking up now is it is picking up, which Google never used to pick up posts on Instagram or LinkedIn or some of these social platforms. These are also signals of visibility and indication of expertise.
Mm.
Um, Now, with all of that said, and that's probably causing some folks' heads to swim, there are things that you can do. Um, if you write a blog on your website every month or your company does, make sure there's an author associated with it. Make sure there's a byline that um, indicates who that person is and what their experience is. You may structure the information on a product page or a service page a little bit differently now that there is a desire for people to get a question answered. And so, if you are an HVAC company, uh, typically the way you would want your information to be recognized by Google is who's or the best HVAC company in Charleston, South Carolina. You might want to restructure that to say, when is the best time to have my HVAC system serviced for the spring in Charleston,
Mm.
South Carolina? That's a question.
Yeah.
Now, the way you would answer that is you would start out that blog with about a 60 to 80 word answer that answers that question. So it's very easy for this large language model to discern, or these voice search things. And then you go on and you can create the content below that. Um, so it is different. It would benefit
Mm.
the listeners to educate themselves a little bit, but yeah, there are a few shifts that need to happen, and hopefully, I've given
Mm.
enough in that description that allows
Mm.
people at least a starting point to understand what the difference is.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I noticed when I first started using ChatGPT, Gemini, all the language models,
Yeah,
was the shift in mindset from I'm going to Google to find a way to find an answer
yep,
to I'm going to ChatGPT to find the answer.
correct.
And that's a big mental shift in how both from both sides of it, right? From the side of how beneficial that is to me looking, but also how is it do I get found from the other end so that I
Right.
can be a credible answer, not just some way to find that answer.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And again, if we go back to personal brand and the founder, the owner, um, the executive, the subject matter expert, if you can talk about 3 to 5 things and not 30 different,
Mm.
and they love coherence.
Mhm.
And so their ability to track what you are talking about across multiple places is much easier if you are looking at 3 to 5 topics from all angles, as opposed to talking about leadership one day and sales strategies another day and um, your vacation that you went on the next day. So that's another little inside tip.
Mm. So I think this is, it obviously resonates with me, and I think that makes a lot of sense. But I'm from a business person's perspective, though, most companies they do have subject matter experts scattered about in the organization, but a lot of them aren't building their own brands. They aren't thinking about it from that visibility kind of
Right.
perspective. So, what advice do you have for companies that are, how do they find those people? How do they get them started? And how do you get them to start thinking of themselves as thought leaders?
Yeah. And I would say, again, that title carries a lot of weight, thought leader, and there may be some imposter syndrome with folks. But yeah, I mean, look in your organization. Who are the go-to people that anytime there's a client meeting or
Mhm.
a problem figuring something out, who are the people that you go to, right? Who are the names that are always like, "Oh, Michael knows all about that. Let's get
Yeah.
Michael. Oh, Susan? Oh my gosh, I gotta have her in the next sales meeting because of the way that she's very clear on the way she explains this particular thing, and she doesn't use jargon." And, um, so an organization needs to understand if you give a little bit of, um I mean, it is a nice compliment for an organization to come to somebody and say, "We'd like for you to express your thoughts openly about our industry."
Yeah.
Um, there are industry events. There are organizations that your company probably belongs to, and they probably have an email list or a newsletter or a conference that they're looking for speakers. If that person feels uncomfortable, maybe there's some speaker training that's necessary. Maybe
Yeah.
you open up a little bit of bandwidth within their schedule and say, we'd love for you to contribute to an article once a month or every other month. Interview them over Zoom so they don't have to sit there and write something and then use that transcription that can be included. And so I would say it differs for every organization and every person. Um, but if you are proactive and have a strategy about what you need to do, I think the payoff, you would be amazed at where you start in this process and where you end up 6, 8, 12 months later. Um, and yeah, I mean, I'd be happy to, if somebody wants to reach out to me after this podcast, and I could give you some tips. But yeah, maybe some of that is helpful to the listeners.
Yeah, no, that's very helpful. Well, Jimmy, that's all the time we have today. Although I could certainly keep the conversation going. It's really interesting, and I know, all the executives that listen to this. This is something that is a hot topic and very top of
Sure.
mind for them. But before I let you go, one of the things I like to do at the end of every show is just get a recommendation for the audience, somebody that's a thought leader, an author, podcaster, somebody that you follow that you think would really help the audience.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about storytelling today, and probably my go-to person that I'm actually going to have the opportunity to hang out with next weekend is Matthew Dix. He wrote a book called Storyworthy, and he also has a business version of that book. Not that Storyworthy is not um, business oriented, but uh, he has an amazing story. And if anybody's looking for a great book to listen to, or a great book to read, or someone that would be an awesome guest for this podcast, I would say Matthew would be an awesome one.
Great. Yeah, no, great recommendation. Thanks so much. And Jimmy, thanks so much for joining today. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, thank you. Had a great time, Michael.
And that's the show for this week. Thank you all for joining us. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to the show. If you enjoy the show, please leave us a review to help others find us. For more research on AI and other software, check out arionresearch.com. If you're an expert in AI, generative AI, or business automation, either as a provider or an end user, email your information to disambiguation@arionresearch.com. Don't forget to join us next week. Disambiguation is an Arion Research production. I'm Michael Fawcett, and this is the Disambiguation Podcast.